If you're over 40 and still training jiu-jitsu, you've probably felt this shift. It's not that your technique disappeared. It's not that you stopped caring. It's that what used to work doesn't anymore. At 25, you could fix a bad week with more rounds. At 45, more rounds can create a bad month. And if you don't adjust, burnout doesn't just show up loudly, it shows up quietly. Not in one dramatic failure, just in a slow accumulation of fatigue, irritation, and doubt. And most people mistake that feeling for decline. It's not decline. The math changed. There was a point for me when I started to notice something subtle. I wasn't injured. I wasn't quitting. I wasn't even training less. But I was leaving the gym feeling heavier. Not physically, mentally. Rounds felt harder to recover from. Sleep felt more fragile. Small aches lingered longer than they used to. And that's when I realized this isn't about toughness. It's about calibration. When we're younger, volume fixes everything. Intensity feels productive. Recovery is automatic. You can roll hard 3 days in a row and feel fine by the weekend. After 40, volume accumulates cost. Intensity taxes sleep. Recovery becomes structural instead of automatic. And the issue isn't that you're aging out of jiu-jitsu, it's that you're still training like the math didn't change. And that's where burnout begins. Not because you're weak, not because you don't love it, because you're miscalibrated. The first shift you should have to make after 40 is this. Recovery is no longer accidental. It has to be planned. Not hacks, not fancy supplements, not ice baths. It's simple, boring structure. Sleep becomes non-negotiable. You choose your training partners carefully. You skip the extra ego round. You space your high-intensity days instead of stacking them. You lift with intention instead of punishment. You don't get to train hard every session anymore. You get to train intelligently. And that's not weakness, that's sustainability. The second shift is harder. Volume cannot be your identity anymore. A lot of grapplers over 40 still measure themselves by output. How many rounds did you get? How many days did you train this week? Did you stay for the open mat or go to the open mat? But if your identity is built on volume, burnout becomes inevitable because your body will eventually veto your ego. Burnout at this stage of life is rarely just physical exhaustion. It's ego friction. It's the gap between who you were at 28 and who you are now. And here's the truth. You're allowed to train differently. You're allowed to be strategic. You're allowed to leave before exhaustion. That's not decline, that's maturity. One of the biggest traps for men over 40 is trying to prove they're still the same athlete they were at 28. You don't need to prove that. You need to preserve your ability to train next month. There's a difference between intensity and insecurity, and burnout often hides in insecurity. The third shift is understanding that strength becomes insurance. Rolling alone isn't enough after 40. You don't need bodybuilding. You don't need punishing workouts. You do need basic strength that works for you, that protects your joints, supports recovery, maintains tissue resilience, and reduces chronic irritation. You're not lifting to dominate, you're lifting to stay. That's longevity thinking. The fourth shift is redefining progress. At 25, progress looks like dominance, more taps, more rounds, more intensity. At 45, progress looks like durability. If you can train consistently, stay relatively pain-free, improve slowly, avoid major setbacks, that is progress. Longevity is a performance metric. If you walk into the gym at 50 and still move well, still learn, still enjoy the room, that's a win most people never reach, because most people flame out somewhere between 35 and 45, not from one catastrophic injury, from accumulation. This isn't about slowing down, it's about staying long enough to matter. Most people don't quit jiu-jitsu because they stopped loving it. They quit because they never adjusted the math. They trained like they were 25 until their body forced the decision. You don't have to wait for that moment. You can recalibrate now. If this conversation resonates, that's exactly why I wrote Jiu-Jitsu is the long game. It's not about techniques. It's about staying. I'll link it below if you want to go deeper.